If you believe in God, and in fact this is really like the only logical explanation for the existence of human beings, for the existence of the universe, it's something that human beings intuitively know, and it's something that's quite obvious. But I know there are people who disbelieve, there are people who are agnostic. But the points that I'm going to bring up next, they are for people who already believe in God. They already believe in the Creator, the all-knowing, the eternal, the all-powerful. So this being the fact that there is an all-knowing Creator, that God exists, we are obviously as human beings going to want to get to know Him. We're going to want to know things about Him, things about ourselves. Why did He create us? What is our purpose? What happens when we die? These are natural questions, and in fact these are the most important and significant questions a human being can ask. So did God answer these questions for us? Now if we search for these answers, there's a countless amount of approaches that we can take. There are people who have philosophized about such things. There are people who have tried to study the world and come to conclusions. There are events that we've heard about that have occurred or allegedly occurred throughout history. But the only one who can really for sure answer these questions is God Himself. Because not only are human beings inherently flawed, we make mistakes, our intellect is very limited, but the answers to these questions involve the unseen world that we are completely detached from. So the only real untainted truth that we can come to related to these subjects is that which God teaches us Himself. So the question is, did God communicate with us? Did He give us answers to these questions? Did He give us guidance? Well, if we want to explore that which legitimately claims to be from God, a message from the Creator, and also have a legitimate history of being preserved, meaning we know where it came from, we know the original language, there's not a bunch of anonymous authors and scribes who translated it and passed it down, but rather we know that 100% this is authentic, this is what was revealed, this is the original language, this is what has been passed down to us. The only such thing that we have from the Creator is the Quran. The Quran is completely in a class of its own in this regard. There's nothing comparable, there's nothing like it. So that being the reality, do you think that it's likely that the Quran, being the one scripture that was preserved, the one scripture that claims to be word for word, letter for letter, the speech of God, of the Creator, do you think it's likely that He would allow this to be the case if it weren't from Him? If the Quran was a lie, a made-up evil thing, don't you think God would have destroyed it and the religion attached to it, rather than allow it to not only spread but flourish for hundreds of years? If the man who came with this Quran, if he was fabricating these lies about the Creator, don't you think that God would have destroyed this man, cursed this man altogether? If not that, you would think that surely at least He wouldn't allow him to become the most beloved, influential man in human history. That wouldn't make any sense. Well then, how do you explain the Prophet Muhammad becoming the most beloved and influential human being in human history? His name to this very day is the most common name in the world. More people name their children after him than anyone or anything else. Not only that, but people try to emulate this man in every aspect of their life. From the way that they look, to the way that they speak, to the things that they do, to the way that they live their life. And this man's legacy has been preserved in a way that no other human being in human history has ever experienced. If you look at the amount of time and effort, the science that has been put into studying this man's life, his teachings, implementing it in people's lives, there's nothing that comes remotely close. So already having established that God exists, is it conceivable that He would allow the Prophet Muhammad to reach such a high level? The highest level of any human being in history, and dare I say the highest level that any human being will ever reach in the future. If he was a person that was lying against God, and what is worse, what is more evil than a person who lies against God, who comes forth and says God said this when God didn't say that? Surely this is of the most evil things a person can do. So how is it possible that this man would have reached such a level if he was lying? He came with a scripture that millions of people memorize front to back and recite every single day in the name of God. How is that even conceivable? Especially considering the fact that everything, 100% of what the Prophet Muhammad taught was all about worshiping God and worshiping God alone. 100% of his message was nothing is worthy of worship except God. He didn't want to be worshipped himself, And in fact, he lived the life of a poor person when he could have lived the life of a king. But for him, it was all about spreading this message of worshiping God alone. It wasn't about enjoying the luxuries of this life. And he even confirmed the reality of past traditions, such as prophets like Moses, Abraham, and Jesus, and that they also worshiped God alone and taught their people to worship God alone, and that nothing else deserves the right to be worshipped except God. That was always the true religion for human beings. It always has been and always will be. So how can you possibly believe in God and not believe that the Quran is from God or that the Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God?